Yeah. I think he is because he just had a surgery. Oh, well, he's finally getting surgery in the shoulder. It's been an issue for a few years at this point. So he might be returning to racing. Just might. I honestly hope he will, because then we could fill 2 cars for LMU endurance racing. Hello, good evening, and welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and those who identify otherwise, for this fifth and final round of the SSRI Sunday Sprint Championship. Tonight we have an extraordinary good race ready for you guys, as we'll be taking on the mighty Circuit of the Americas. A racetrack that is hated by some, loved by others. It's really a sort of like 50-50 split in terms of that, but surely it will be interesting to see, as we have a lot of good racing parts on this track and great overtaking opportunities. Definitely a track that challenges the good driver skills. Well, the medium and bad drivers as well, challenging the skills of all drivers of all levels in the virtual America. 60 minutes of racing this evening to decide the two championships, the pros and the AMs. It is super tight in the pro championship, as only 1 point separate the top two, with Samuel von Liebenstein on 70 points and Nick Vargas on 69. A little bit of a gap down to P3. There's a theoretical chance that Sam Smith could take the championship, but that would be very low. Same for Patrick van der Linden, and well, a very theoretical chance that that Dario Vinelli could take it as well. But I will keep focus on von Liebenstein and Nick Vargas unless something crazy happens this evening, with the only 1 point separating the two of those. In the AM category, though, it is a little bit more one-sided. It's Sander Vale who have 77 points and Fabio Galamini on 66 points. It is a little bit interesting because drop results could come into play there, as both of them have a third place as their drop round, and for Fabio Galamini to win the championship, well, he will need, well, he could at a maximum tie it for the overall lead if he wins the race and Sander Vale finishes third or worse. Then it will go into a tie, but I guess we'll find out in about 1.5 hours time when we are done with qualifying and the actual race this evening to crown our two champions of the Sunday League. Surely something that will be worth watching for you guys out there on the YouTube and wherever else you might watch it. I would assume YouTube would be the place to do so. And those watching in after the race, don't spoil anything for yourselves. Even though you know the results, you will definitely not know the battles that are coming up all over the track this wonderful evening. A track guide is laying around somewhere hiding. I believe we have it ready already as we're coming down the main straight of COTA, heading into turn 1. Tight, very steep uphill, big open entry to the corner, and then the almost full 180-degree hairpin, the big red corner, before we head into the fake Maggots and Beckett's down the hill. This section of the track took a lot of inspiration from Maggots and Beckett's, of course, as we will see as we go under the bridge, heading through the corners. Very fast corners, left, right. Coming through, heading through the long right-hander that sort of is a bit tricky. Turn 7 before heading into, well, this would be 7 before heading into 8 and 9. Have to position the car correctly. You can take a lot of curb here, but taking a little bit too much and you'll get those famous track cuts. The sausage on the inside could throw off cars as well. Exit could also be a place where we would see the track cuts this evening before heading down through 10 and into 11. Overtaking opportunities into 11 as well. But if you do so, you have to be careful when you come down the long back straight, as if you do the overtake, you could come under immediate pressure due to the longness of this mighty straight. It goes on and on forever and ever before heading into 12 at the back end. Very sharp left-hander. More often than not, when people try to overtake each other here, a car will end up running wide, as it is a little bit sharper than you might think. A little bit over a 90-degree corner for into 13, 14, and 15. Super good racing corners, as you can go side by side through all of them. Especially coming into to the final part, 15 for this. So fun to see when the cars do that. Surely we'll see a little bit of that this evening before heading up around the the big tower for 16, 17, 18. A lot of inspiration from Turkey's turn 8. The multi-apex corner, roughly the same radius. You can just about go full throttle in the GT3 cars before we head into turn 19 and 20, the two final corners. In IndyCar, of course, every year when they race here, we see them go as wide as they possibly can, as they don't have the track limits, but we do, so be careful of that. Before turn 20 will finish off the track. Pit entry can be a bit tricky as well, because the pit board appears a lot sooner than you might think. But I will get into that a little bit more when we head into the actual race and we see that in full action. That was a mighty lap of Circuit of the Americas. But before we head into the final round of this season, we could maybe do a little bit of advertisement for the next Sunday season that's coming up shortly. Starting off on the 1st of June. So in just 2 weeks' time, we'll be right back at it with great racing these Sunday evenings here at the SSRI YouTube channel, starting off at Donnington Park before heading to Mount Panorama, Snetterton, Silverstone and Watkins Glen. We have taken into account that there are Formula 1 and Le Mans races in the weekends as well, so that's why it's not a completely weekly thing that's going to happen. Other championships that we have going at the minute would be something like the LMU, the SLMS Championship by Coach Dave. 2 races have passed in this season so far, and with 3 rounds to go, it's still all up for grabs in both Hypercar and GT3. Heading on to Sebring next time out on the 28th of May. Remember to check that out, because the broadcasting crew there are, if not as lovely as us, maybe a little bit less, of course. Everyone loves Mr. Warner Oliver and Chris Hill, the famous duo, but they are doing a pretty good job of LMU as well. And a final season that we have running at the minute would be the Tuesday evening Sprint Championship that will be rounding off next Tuesday, or the upcoming Tuesday, at Valencia. Also interesting championship there, though Michael Thomas already declared champion of the pros. It's still up for grabs in the rest of the championships, I believe, if I remember correctly, and Valencia will definitely be an interesting one for a season finale in about 2 days' time. Same place, same people around. Maybe if we're lucky, we get a little bit of a guest commentator. We'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, tune in for all of the racing that's happening here on the Simsport Racing International YouTube channel, as it's always high intensity and great racing. Well, most of the time. But I guess we'll have to wait and see for this evening. We are getting somewhat close to qualifying, as I think the drivers are just finishing out practice as we are speaking. And it will surely be interesting to see who will put it on pole tonight. A lot of focus on Vargas and Samuel van Liebenstein, as that is the main battle, 1 point between them before we start racing here at COTA. The mighty virtual American racetrack. But also the AM class could be interesting. It does require Sander Vale to finish 3rd all over, but it could happen, you never know. He have finished 3rd once this season. And just a little bit of bad luck early on in the race, that could mean everything for Vale in this one. We have seen him crawl up through the field from low positions before and perform quite well, but COTA is a tricky place to do so. Even though there are great overtaking opportunities, we usually don't see that big of a lap time difference between the top and the bottom drivers. Even though it is a very long and very technical track, it is very close lap time wise. In percentages, we are speaking here not in actual thousandths of a second. Or well, time per kilometer driven, or how we should try and calculate that. I guess we'll never know how we do that. Only 7 cars though, that's a bit interesting. And that would mean Sander Vale will automatically take the AM class win if this if no one else shows up for this one. But Van Liebenstein and Vargas, a lot of focus on those drivers this evening, of course. Van Liebenstein in the Honda, Nick Vargas in the Ferrari. Van Liebenstein out leading the pack coming out of the pits to on the outlap before they start their first flying lap. He is pulling Scheckerman behind him, giving him a little bit of a helping toe if Scheckerman can stay close enough to Van Liebenstein when they start their flying laps. So maybe Schickerman could be an outsider for a good result. Rick De Moyne in the race as well, in another Honda hypercar driver on Wednesdays as well. He was up there in the and qualifying at Monza in his Toyota and could have been a potential race winner last time out. But unfortunately things went wrong for him there. Sander Vale, of course, will take the checkered flag. Or well, if no one else shows up, then he will take the championship by default this evening. Patrick van der Linden in the Audi. A lot of different manufacturers actually in this one. In fifth, Schickerman in the Porsche and Caesar in the 240 McLaren. And then I think we have been all around all the drivers. Speaking of Sander Vale, looking at him here as he's coming around the Turkey-ish section. Let's just call it the turn 8 section, even though it's not technically turn 8 around here. In the Ferrari, I think the Ferrari would be a very nice car to drive around here, as it is very, very good on the curbs. Probably the car that I would prefer out of the bunch that have turned up for this evening. The Honda is famously known for being a little bit tricky on the curbs, of course, but let's see how Van Diemstein will handle this during this evening of racing as Sander Vale starts his first flying lap as he came across the line. It's basically just the honors that's in it for Vale, though other drivers could potentially still show up for this race on a late call. But we'll have to wait and see. 5 out of the 7 drivers actually in a voice call together, which is quite interesting. The community going strong in that matters. Also a rain predicted. That could be also be very, very interesting, as I do believe qualifying and the race is set to happen just after one another in these Sunday races. Following Sander Vale around still with the onboard cam in the bottom right hand screen, where you can see how tricky that first sector was as he's coming down the hill into the hard braking zone of I think we call it turn 11 before the race. So let's continue to call it that. It might actually be 10, but turn 11 as he went through, and then it's all about the speed. Difficult track to set the car up for with the long straight. You really don't want any wing on the back of the car, but then you have both sector 1 and sector 3 that does require a lot of downforce to be super quick in, or well, half of sector 2, as well as the first split time comes just after, or just in the middle of the Maggots-Beckett-ish part of the track. But a Vale going through the tricky sector 3 as we are speaking. Coming around, looks very nice so far, getting the apexes hooked up. The very, very tricky 14 doesn't go over the inside curbs, as some drivers will prefer to do, coming into the turn 8 section around the big tower. Running a slightly wide line, he could have done that a bit quicker, but still looks very fast. The tricky 19 and 20, especially 19, you're coming in with so much speed, and you have to steer it in with so much precision to go around with max speed. But missing that just a little bit, you'll lose so much time around there. Sander Vale puts it in provisional third, 2.2 seconds-ish behind Van Liebenstein, who currently leads out with a 2 minutes 6 seconds, 0.587 in his Honda. Schickerman also with a lap time on the board. Not his best time. We did see a little bit of a wheel spin there, or at least some lecrages being put down into the tarmac. Yes, I think that's the analogy that we're going to use. As he came around one of the corners, I think that would have been turn 9. Would have been turn 9. He came around and put them down. Maybe using a little bit too much throttle. Vale already back in the pits, getting a fresh set of tires. Setup-wise, it's interesting. The drivers, they can change setups between qualifying and race. It is open setups there. So you could potentially have a qualifying setup and a race setup, as it will likely be a little bit rainy when we start this race. Schickerman coming around into the tricky braking zone. Using it quite nicely, takes the curbs there, puts the lecrages down once again. He might need to run a bit more TC on that Porsche. Or at least control the throttles slightly more with his right foot. Into 19 we go. Looks fast, but a little bit of insecurity there. The turn in that could have that will have lost him a little bit of time. Let's see what happens through turn 20, and then the finish line actually comes quite quickly after the turn as we head over now. Zickerman up into third, 1.5 behind Van Liebenstein now. Vargas with his first lap time, not that competitive, 1.8 behind Van Liebenstein. As Patrick van der Linden comes through turn 20 and puts his first lap time on the board. Very quick lap there, almost close to Van Liebenstein, only 8/10 behind, within a second of pole. So that could be promising signs there for Patrick van der Linden. Sean Caesar, we'll continue to call him Caesar, I think that's easier for me to pronounce. Coming around in the McLaren, he have been through the Magnussen-Beckett-ish section. The tricky turn 8 before 9 and 10. The downhill there, using all of the curb available. You can cut that quite a bit and get away with it into the hairpin before heading on to the back straight. Full throttle on the car, but this is the time when we come to the race where the drivers have the have enough time on their laps to change MFD settings and stuff like that. Of course, unless if they are in close battles down the straight, then they will definitely not have time to do that. Then I have to focus around. But for endurance races, it's quite nice to have that long straight where you can fool around with strategies and tire pressures when you are driving and have conversations with your race engineer without it being too much of an annoyance. Through the tricky sector 3. Goes in, takes a little bit of the curb, doesn't put anything down into the tarmac except for patience on the throttle. Takes a much tighter line than we saw Vale do earlier. And then I think he might have invalidated or just decided to back out of it. Van Liebenstein across the line improves to 2 minutes 6.092. Putting a lot of pressure on Nick Vargas to find some lap time here in qualifying to get up there next to Van Liebenstein to challenge for the title. It should remain clear for the duration of qualifying, but at some time during the race that rain could potentially hit, and that could throw a spanner into the strategies for these drivers. Van Liebenstein still going. No one have been in touching that bollard yet. You can actually go all the way up to the bollard before it becomes a track cut. Same thing with that cone on the inside of the corner we saw there. As Van Liebenstein heads into the hairpin leading on to the back straight. Taking quite a bit too much curb there and throwing him way off course, and returning to garage to take a fresh set of tires and probably a bit of fuel as well. As Vargas seems to not be able to find the pace at the minute, still 1.7 behind Van Liebenstein. Rick DeMoy still not with a valid lap time. Let's see if he can do better this time around. Already pushing the track limits that are coming into turn 1, being all the way over the white lines. But the Honda, that is a tricky car around here, especially with all of the curbing. It's not famously good on the curves, of course, and once the rain hit, I actually think that Vargas will have the upper hand when it comes to car selection. We do know that the Honda is a super quick car around most racetracks if you can control it. But then race pace-wise, the tire wear is usually what keeps the Honda from being on the very top end of the spectra there. Also challenging car to drive. But interesting to see how it will pan out this evening. We have seen, we saw at Kyalami, for example, that the Hondas, they had to come in for tires, and they were very slow at the end of their stints, where Vargas in the Ferrari, he could do the entire race on just that one set of tires. That really paid the difference there for Vargas, or paid dividends there for Vargas at Kyalami. But let's see how it goes this evening. Rick DeMoy in the Jensen Team Rocket RJN livery, the classic one. Obviously, it's a reference to the Braun GP car that Jensen Button won his Formula 1 Drivers' World Championship in Same color scheme around there. Beautiful, beautiful cars. And very eye-catching on track. Dimoy coming into the turn 8 section. Or Istanbul corner, whatever we should call it. Maybe Istanbul corner is a bit better. A little bit of a slide there, but that Honda that just likes to get that rear end out. Where I would usually invalidate my lap times there between 19 and 20, and if you do so, then your next lap will be invalid as well. But let's see, does Dimoy put a time on the board this time? Yes, and jumps up to second. Honda lockout at the minute on the front row, but still almost or just over a full second behind von Liebenstein. And those Honda seem super quick here in qualifying. But let's see if this is a trend that keeps on going. It is close between Dimoy and all the way down to Caesar in fourth. Those three drivers with Patrick van der Linden, of course, in third in between them, who's currently in the pits coming out for... He could potentially do 2 runs, go out, put a lap time in, back to the pits and out again, but I think that when he leaves the pits, then he'll probably be fueled to go to the checkered flag. But let's wait and see on that. Still a little bit of time, and he's messing about something in the pits. He's rolling now. Still on board with Dimoy. Gets it hooked there. Looked, could have been a little bit more tighter to get early on the throttle. Coming down the back straight. Just listen to the roar of that VTEC. As he goes hard on the brakes. It looked a bit late, but does he manage to get a stop? He does actually. That small red tent when we're coming down the back straight, that's usually where I would start braking. Looked like Dimoy was a little bit later than that and still got the car stopped. Mad skills from the Honda driver. Coming through and into the Istanbul corner. Again, much tighter than we saw Vale do earlier on. Does look like it's understeering a little bit there for Rick Dimoy. But he does have a good lap time on the board, so he could risk a little bit more. Didn't look too risky there. Could have carried maybe 2 to 8 more kilometers per hour through turn 19, but across the line Dimoy goes. Oh, and he does improve. Now down to just over half a second between the two Hondas. Dimoy improving massively at the minute. Also interesting that the track is still green. And have been for the entirety of this session. Not a lot of grip in the track, and that might be the reason why we've seen both a Schickerman in the Porsche and the two Honda struggle a little bit with traction. I would assume Patrick van der Linden would have the same issue, but yeah, that could be one of the reasons why the time differences are so vast. It is very challenging to drive around on a green track when you don't have that natural grip of the track. Then the cars just become so slidey and hard to keep in there. We saw the licorices being put down again there for Schickerman through 19. It is a sign that he could have carried more speed through if he so on wished to. But didn't do so. Going back to the pits, he can still make it out for 1 more run. Probably 2 time laps if he's very quick on the out lap. Following Vargas now through Sector 3 in the Mode 11 livery. Not the most default of liveries, colors on the livery that we've seen on the Mode 11 cars, but Vargas does seem to like running that green and yellow livery on the Ferrari. As he comes through 19. Again, putting the licorices down. It seems to be really hard for the drivers getting that traction out of 19. It is also a corner where you have maximum usage of your downforce on the car. As CF started another lap, he will have this one and 1 more. And then time will run out for Nick Vargas here in qualifying. But let's see if the track will actually go to something better than green here in the last couple of minutes. It should become slightly faster and faster for every lap the cars are driving, more and more rubber gets put into the track, and traction increases ever so slightly every lap for these drivers. So it's all about having that feel for when you can push and how much you can push these cars around here this evening. It looks very good so far for Nick Vargas, at least style-wise. Into the hairpin. Turning in there very close to the cameras. Again, the licorices are getting put down. Losing time, not getting a proper traction there. As he roars down the back straight. On board with Vargas here through the tricky sector 3. He does have a lot of time that he needs to find, but that could indicate that he have made some sort of a mistake on his previous attempts. As 1.7 seconds, that is quite a bit to be behind your championship rival. We do know that a lot of the Dutch drivers here in the race tonight, they've actually been out on a field trip today to Zandvoort, maybe to scout out real life driving tricks, tips and tricks. So that's quite interesting. Into the penultimate corner of 19, and then 20 for the second final time for Vargas in qualifying on this. If he pulls over because of not enough fuel. Across the line he goes, only jumps up into 5th. One more shot for Vargas to try and claim pole, at least make up a few positions that could put him closer to championship rival Samuel van Liebenstein. Rick de Moy finishing his second to final lap. He will have one more in it if he have fuel for it. Does improve once again, but not enough fuel to go for one more. So de Moy will not improve any further. 2.5 behind. De Moy behind Samuel van Liebenstein. That's 0.25, of course, 0.26 if you round up, but who does that? Who really does that? We're not that good at math. Scheckerman done with qualifying as well. Finishes 1.2 seconds behind Samuel van Liebenstein. I really hope the rain will make this race more interesting, as Patrick van der Linden comes around through the Istanbul corner in the Audi. Famous for being loose, that Audi. Ooh, as we see it go sliding there. 4-wheel drift for Patrick van der Linden, but keeps it going. And that rain looks more and more ominous for the race. That will surely be interesting. And see who will be on top when the rain hits, and who can manage to adapt the best. Patrick van der Linden across the line. He will have one more shot in this qualifying, and he will need to find about 1.28 seconds if he wants to take that pole away from Samuel van Liebenstein. Vargas currently set in 5th. This is his final attempt here in qualifying. Vale starts his final lap as well. All the drivers are out on their final laps as we are speaking. Let's see what happens. Vargas through the Istanbul corner. Only 19 and 20 to go. Doesn't put the licorices down this time, so a little bit better through 19. At least Vale is done with qualifying as well, as he spun out. Same goes for, I think that's van der Linden, and Vargas across line. He improves to 4th. No, that was van Liebenstein was done with qualifying. So only Caesar and van der Linden left, or they are still out there on track. Also, two drivers that are very close together in lap time wise here in qualifying. So let's see what they can do. Will any of them get a jump and move a little bit further up the grid? Down the back straight of COTA we go. Into the braking zone. Looks good so far for Sean Caesar. Doesn't use the exit curb though. Maybe that's not too bad in the McLaren, not taking those. Let's wait and see. Into sector 3 we go. He will be the final driver to take the checkered flag here in qualifying. Van der Linden will do it just a few seconds before I feel like that's about a gap of Van Linden is done there invalidating his lap time, so it's only Sean Caesar with the opportunity to improve. Here in qualifying as he comes around 19 and only 20 to go. Let's see what he can do. And across the line, up to third for Sean Caesar there on the final lap. Good improvement. Rain on the horizon for the race. That surely will be interesting. But before we get to that part, we'll have a short break and we'll be right back, as the drivers will probably start their formation lap at that point. We'll return after this. as we are back and look at that. Race start will be on a flooded racetrack, it looks like. But the skies will clear out in not so long. I don't think anyone will risk it on dry tires though. This is definitely a wet tire start. And how long it will take for the track to dry up, we'll have to wait and see. But this definitely plays into the favor of Nick Vargas, even though he starts from 5th position on the grid. As we see von Liebenstein drop off the jacks there, as he might have finished all of his preparation for this event. But this is the thing, how much fuel do you take in the start? Do you fuel it up so you could potentially go to the end of the race, or do you have an idea of when the track starts to clear up? That will be the main strategy call here. If we see someone come in too early, or extremely early, then it might be the reason behind it. They might not have fuel to go to the end, but let's see. If it was me, I would definitely take quite a bit of fuel in a situation like this. But when do the drivers choose to change over from the wets to the dries? That will be one of the things to look out for here at COTA this evening, as the drivers have rolled out on the formation lap. As you can really see the shine there from the very, very wet track. Honda lockout in the front. We can see Demoy testing out the conditions early. A lot of weaving from a lot of drivers, just checking how wet the track actually is. It's not that often you get to race in fully flooded conditions, so this could potentially be new for some of the drivers. I at least haven't seen it before here on SSRI, that we have been fully flooded, but this could be interesting, or it will definitely be interesting, we should say, to see who will pick it up. But as we are rolling on the formation lap, no more drivers will join this event, which means that we can already now crown Sander Vale as the AM champion. He would have needed to finish 3rd or worse, with Kyalami in 1st position to make it a points tie, including drop results. So yep, as we have Checkerman spinning off already on the formation lap. This track is very wet out there. That could maybe be a bad omen for the race. The Porsche is usually pretty good in wet conditions, but maybe not for Checkerman. We'll have to wait and see with that one as well. But yeah, definitely a very, very wet track, as we can also see Sander Vale there in the background running deep. A lot of caution will have to be taken here early on for the drivers have already stopped raining, but that doesn't mean it's dry yet. Now that they will have to wait for the track to dry up, and that will be quite a bit, I would assume, from this flooded conditions. But it might drop from flooded to wet just within the initial 2 laps or so, if it goes well for the drivers. 23-degree ambient and 29 on the track, so that could make it dry out a little bit quicker than if it was completely cold. But then again, only 7 cars on the track to move the rain away. A dry line will appear at some point, and then it's all about keeping the car on that dry line. But this could play into the amount of pressure that the drivers have chosen to take in their tires. Have you set it up to be good here in the start of the race, or have you taken pressures that will maybe be a little bit under pressured early, but then come into its zone later on the first stint, as the drivers will shortly start to line up in NASCAR formation side by side. With the 2 Hondas, von Liebenstein on pole, Rick Demoy in 2nd, Caesar in 3rd, Checkerman 4th, Vargas 5th, Patrick van der Linden in 6th, and Sander Vale rounds out the grid in 7th position. The only AM driver on track. But let's see if the AM driver can beat out some of the pros, maybe. Dual cameras as always, the front and the back of the field, as they're coming around the final corner, turn 20. Which means for the last time this season, ladies and gentlemen, we are shortly about to be for the start line. Goddammit, get going. Racing! Good start from Demoy on the outside, but Samuel von Liebenstein seems to have taken it as rain will be predicted to fall again in about half an hour's time. A lot of caution from all of the drivers there through turn 1. Von Liebenstein out in front and spinning out early on. That could be trouble for the championship. Vargas off as well. Same for Schickermann. The two championship leaders are off in turns. Will that be turn 3? Vargas still parked. Von Liebenstein gets going again on this very, very flooded track. The drivers went way too quick there early on. Schickermann also having a bit of difficulties controlling that car side by side though for the lead of the race. Rick Demoy and Sean Caesar going for it. Caesar comes out in front or ahead in this one. Patrick van der Linden also keeping up with the two of them. Oh, there we can see how tricky and wet the curbs are. Just a little bit of a touch on the curb and the side on the car almost went sideways down into turn 9 or 10 or 11, and that's Sean Caesar that goes wide. Patrick van der Linden half spinning as well. Sander Vale being very cautious and then moving himself up into 3rd position in this race. Rick Demoy now having a somewhat of a commanding lead, but Sander Vale up into P3, Schickermann behind, and then I think it's Patrick van der Linden. Yeah, that is Patrick van der Linden in the what would be 5th position, as we can see. Von Liebenstein then the background, and Nick Vargas further behind, as they have both gotten going again. Track will be drying for the next half an hour or so, and then it will start raining again. So we might not see the cars coming off the wet tires in this race, as we are looking at Sander Vale here. Ooh, a little bit of a mistake there from Sean Caesar going deep. Makes him vulnerable for Sander Vale, who usually is a pretty good driver in the wet conditions, and I wouldn't put it behind him that he could potentially challenge for the win. Vargas have gone off again. Not the greatest of starts for Nick Vargas. This could be very challenging for him to catch up to Von Liebenstein and maintain the championship lead, which he holds by 1 point, I believe, at this point. But we'll have to wait and see. So the driver that finishes ahead of Von Liebenstein and Vargas will potentially take the championship, though there might be some drop results that could come into play when they are this far down. Let me just have a quick look on that. No, actually they both missed a race, so they have drop results there already. So it will be the driver that finishes ahead of the two of them that will be crowned champion. Oh, as Vale goes a little bit wider up into 2nd, with Schickermann now up into to 3rd. Sean Caesar putting the pressure on Patrick van der Linden. Caesar almost sliding out there as van der Linden also goes a little bit wide, falling back into to single file formation. Definitely challenging, but now the track have dropped from flooded to wet, as they are all still very tight. Rick Demoy have run out a little bit in the lead of the race, and made that quite a bit of the commanding lead at this point. Vargas seems to be in trouble, as he have invalidated once again this lap. Not the best of or most ideal of scenarios for him, but good news for Samuel von Liebenstein, who have caught up to the back end of the main train of cars. So it's basically only Rick Demoy that have pulled away from this, and then Vargas, who have dropped behind. The remaining what would that be? 5 cars are all in the train for the for 2nd and down. So that is interesting. Following Nick Vargas now. Let's see if he can actually get some traction as the rest of the drivers are heading into the corner at the back end of the main straight. 12, turn 12, I believe that would be, or 11 or something like that. We haven't really figured out the track numbers yet, as they are side by side for 2nd. That is Sander Vale and Schickermann, the Porsche and Ferrari. Vale, they're getting a good run, but breaks early, causing a little bit of panic there for van der Linden, who have to take a little bit of evasive action. As look at that, Schickermann goes wide, and that position changes once again in that big battle pack between the 5 of them. Now it's Vale who's back up into 2nd position in the race, with van der Linden following in close behind. He will be looking for a move. As I say that, both van der Linden and Vale goes sliding around. They're almost synchronized, as Sean Caesar gets caught up in that. That have promoted both Schickermann and von Liebenstein further up, so Van Liebenstein up into second position at this point, 1.3 seconds lead over Schickermann. These conditions definitely seem to be tricky for everyone. Van Liebenstein in P2, he seems to have found a little bit of composure in the race as Van der Linden is coming up to Schickermann once again. But over Schickermann goes for a little bit of a slide, that big overspeed now for Van der Linden. He does go off throttle that to avoid getting too close and risking it all. At this point, it's all about keeping that car on the racing track. Different lines through there, but it is difficult to maintain that grip in these conditions. Van Linden all over the back of Schickermann. Super challenging for the drivers. Being stuck behind these conditions are one of the worst feelings, especially through that Maggots and Beckett section early on here at COTA. You have nowhere to go, even though you have overspeed. You need so much of it to actually make the overtake on the outside around there. Van der Linden being a little bit more composed this time around on the throttle. But let's hear the Audi scream down the back straight. Still braking nice and early in these conditions. Schickermann a little bit too late there on the braking, which puts Van der Linden right back up between him. Between these two guys, then one of them makes a little bit of a mistake, then the other one makes one, so it's a little bit of harmonica affecting at the minute. As that was, I think that was Des Moines who have gone around. Yeah, Des Moines lost the lead now to Van Liebenstein. It's all kicking off in this race, and Vargas are catching back up slowly to the back end of the battle group behind. But Des Moines losing the lead of the race as Van Liebenstein goes around and the two Hondas make contact. Huge incident there. Definitely good news for Vargas, but bad there for Van Liebenstein and the Honda crew. Both of them probably took a little bit of damage there in these wet, tricky conditions, as the battle for the lead now are the one between Schickermann and Van der Linden. Porsche versus Audi. As the track is getting slightly drier every lap that passes, but do remember rain is forecasted to come later on in this race again. Big battling going on turn 1, both here in the front and a little bit further back between Sean Caesar and Van Liebenstein, and Sander Vale just ahead of those two. Super tricky conditions down the hill from turn 1, and the lead group have gone into the Maggots Beckett's chicane. Will they keep control of their cars? Does look like that Schickermann have found a little bit of a groove now and can maintain control of that car, but it just takes one moment of less concentration, we should say, because these drivers are so concentrated on keeping the car on the track, or their cars on the track. But it just losing that concentration for a tenth of a second in the middle of the corner, or turning in, and you expect, or maybe just over rotating on the wheel, you'll maybe get into that slide, taking too much speed through, especially the Istanbul corners. That will be that's one of the main killers around here in these conditions. As the battling still happening all over the track. Sander Vale under severe pressure from Caesar. Schickermann getting a little bit of a gap down the back straight, but Vale definitely under pressure as Caesar pulls out of the slipstream, showing himself. So that could be a potential battle of bravery into the corner at the back straight, end of the back straight, looks like it. And Sean Caesar goes for it, keeps it very tight on the apex, and actually is ahead, but remember, next corner goes to the right, so advantage for Vale now. As this opens the door for Van Liebenstein, that almost makes it 3 wide between them. Very, very good battle. Vale keeps on top, contact between Vale and Sean Caesar, and Vale power slides it through there. What a drift from Sander Vale. Keeps control after the contact with Sean Caesar. Lucky the corner went that direction, but a super safe there from Sander Vale. As Van Liebenstein have overtaken Sean Caesar, he chose to stay behind, leaving giving the position back, or not trying to take advantage of a mistake he made himself, and they made the contact. Good sportsmanship from Sean Caesar as he runs wide there through 20, which leaves Van Liebenstein and Sander Vale in the battle coming into turn 1. just as close as it is up in the front. Let's see, Van Liebenstein goes to the inside. Remember, very open turn 1. But no cigar, but Vale leaves way too much room, then misses the braking, and Van Liebenstein back up into into third position. Really harmonicking through the field so far, all of the drivers in this event. So let's see if Van Liebenstein this time can keep control of the car in these conditions, as he tries to pull away from Sander Vale and Sean Caesar behind, as the lap time should start coming down. But then again, with all of this battling, it's hard to say when they will actually start to drop down. 10 minutes already passed in this event, even though it seems like we started just 10 seconds ago. It's been so action-packed so far in these conditions here at COTA. Everything is bigger in Texas, even the rain, it looks like. And the intensity of the races. Van Liebenstein in the slightly more blue car than Sander Vale, who kept it all green. And we can just see that in the background, Vargas catching very nicely to the back of the pack. But look at this, coming into the corner at the end of the back straight. Sean Caesar very close to Vale. Will second time be lucky for Sean Caesar? No, he pulls in behind Vale. As Vale is proving himself to be quite a bit of a wet weather specialist. We did mention this earlier in the race, that he have performed well in similar conditions previously in history here on SSRI, and proving himself once again this time. He haven't been in too many big mistakes. As we see the Honda of Rick DeMoy there coming too deep, almost contacting the back of Sean Caesar in the move, but through the Istanbul corner. Vale having to lift off there, and Caesar does the same to avoid running into the back of Vale, which puts these three so close together once again. Through 19 we go, and now just 20 to go on this lap. A little bit of a slide there from Rick DeMoy that lost him just a few meters in the battle. But that just means he can potentially try and set up the better exit out of 20. New fastest lap by Van Liebenstein, as he had a full lap running alone. Side by side down the front straight, Sean Caesar and Sander Vale. Caesar to the inside. Will this be enough? Vale going very wide when he tried the cutback, but look at that. Looks like DeMoy actually takes full advantage of this. Goes to the outside of Vale. Not enough, it looks like, but does have the speed. Do they avoid the contact? Looks like they did avoid it so far. But different lines again. This could mean that Sean Caesar actually gets a pretty good jump on the two cars behind and opens the gap just a little bit between himself and Sander Vale, as Vale have to focus on Rick DeMoy behind, who's applying all of the pressure in the world at the minute. Vale there clipping the inside cone. Do remember, in wet weather conditions, the track limits are very, very treacherous, especially around COTA. So we might actually see a drive-throughs later on in the race for track limits, but again, we'll have to wait and see. Just a quick reminder of the pit stop rules here in our 60-minute races. You have to take one mandatory pit stop. Only tires are forced in the pit stops. Whether or not that you choose to fuel or not, it's all up to you. But when you take a pit stop, it's completely optional at what time you do so. But you do have to take it and change those tires. But again, will anyone ever go on to the dries in this event, even though it will dry out ever so slightly in the next 20 minutes or so? When the rain comes back, I don't know if you'll gain enough time by going to the dries that it will be worth it in the end, as you will have to take an additional pit stop if that rain comes down heavily again. As Rick DeMoy actually made the overtake there on Sander Vale, who's dropping a little bit behind, and Rick DeMoy actually seems to have quite a bit of pace and have closed the gap to Sean Caesar, catching right back up to him. Through turn 19, much better run. Could it be already into 20? He tries the move. Yes, at least trying on the inside of 20. Sean Caesar being run a little bit wide there. That's the move done there by Rick DeMoy. Very good wet weather move by Rick DeMoy there, who puts himself up into third position as he comes across the line. Oh, sorry, up to fourth position as he came across the line. As Brian Scheckerman seems to have pulled out the gap between himself and Patrick van der Linde up in the front of the field. he have run away a little bit. It does seem like that he might have gotten the small teething issues of hitting the breaking points ironed out of his driving so far, at least from the last couple of laps. That might be why he have pulled away from Van der Linden, as that seems to be Schickermann's main issue pace-wise, but Van der Linden's still right there. Just one mistake from Schickermann, and Van der Linden will be all over him as they come into to 11. Yes, the corner of many different numbers so far this evening. Someone could maybe be kind to me and put in the YouTube chat which number it actually is, as Nick Vargas have made it back to the back end of the pack as he tries to move on Sander Vale and succeeds. He puts himself up to 6th position with 44 minutes to go. Still quite a bit of distance between himself and Van Liebenstein, but do remember, anything can happen in races like this. But this thing we talked about earlier, if you make the move in 11, you are leaving yourself vulnerable into 12, as Vale got a great slipstream there, but it did look like that he lifted off just to ensure that he wouldn't run into the back of Vargas, as it would also have been a bit of a risky move trying it from that distance from Vale. It's a wise choice to stay behind. But Vargas on a mission. Next man up will be Sean Caesar. He can see him ahead of him. That's the carriers. We do see I wouldn't say a dry line, but a dry-ish line or drier line is starting to form around COTA. As the rain actually have disappeared from the weather forecast. We have seen that before, and I think it will reappear at some point. But yeah, that will definitely be something that will put some of the drivers off if they're not used to these changeable conditions. Caesar with a bit of a slide, but same for Vargas there. He understeers through 20 and losing a bit of distance there to Sean Caesar. On the front hood of Vargas through turn 1. We've got a good idea of the uphill there, and then the downhill out of turn 1 into 2. None of the drivers have started moving out of the racing line to start cooling their tires yet, or at least none of the drivers that we have seen so far down the straights. But it's still interesting to see what happens. It doesn't look like that Van Liebenstein have the pace at the minute to catch up to Patrick Van der Linden, as that gap seems somewhat consistent. Will he have caught up a little bit, but we're talking tenths of a second at this point. So we could potentially catch up within a good 5 or 6 laps or so if this pace keeps onwards. But again, as the track dries up, the Honda will become more and more drivable, and that could play into Van Liebenstein's hands as he comes thundering down the back straight in the Honda. Wipers are still going, even though it's not raining. They still get some spray being kicked up on their windscreens. Also, it can be a little bit of a tricky situation when you're driving and just remembering to turn off that windscreen wiper. I myself have been driving for quite a while with the wiper going without it actually raining, because I forgot to turn it off, and also had situations where it started to rain and then I just couldn't put the wiper on through the corners I was in, so I was sort of blindfolded going through a few corners. But that's quite a bit of time ago, I must say. But surely it can happen to the drivers. 808 have been off a little bit. That's Sander Vale, who have had a little bit of a moment as he have dropped way off the back of the group. Also, the gaps are forming out. The shortest gap or smallest gap at the minute are the gap between P1 and 2, actually 1.6 seconds. As I say that, Van Liebenstein closes almost a second there on Van der Linden over the last lap. So he is catching quickly. Top 3 just about in frame there. Vargas also back down to a 1.5-ish between Sean Caesar. I wonder if anyone will go in to take the dry compound tires at some point in this race. The rain still haven't reappeared on the forecast though, so maybe we actually do get a drying race. I still believe that it will start raining again. When we saw it earlier on, it will probably come back, as it just came back, as I said that, on 10 minutes at this point. So roughly at the halfway point, we'll have a little bit of a rain spell again. but then it should become overcast or just slightly cloudy with a chance of sun later on. No meatballs falling from the sky tonight. Not from these clouds at least. It would be fun weather conditions if we could get that onto ACC. Food rain. Or Sharknadoes, those could be fun racing in as well. Vargas have made it close enough to Sean Caesar that we could start calling it a battle for position. The battle for 5th. But about 9 seconds from Sean, from Sean up to Samuel von Liebenstein. That are the driver that Vargas will be trying to catch up to. If we start from both of them. And both of them on quite the recovery drive. Under 1 second now, the gap between the two of them. As we are heading through the 3rd sector of the track. Super tricky in these conditions through the Istanbul-ish corner. As we see a little bit of a wiggle there from Nick Vargas. Who goes through 19 and into 20. Looks like that Sean Caesar might be slightly quicker than Vargas than the final sector of the track, at least this time around. Vargas moving a little bit out of the spray, but stays in the driest line on the track. Into turn 1 we go. We have passed the point of the race where the drivers are making those braking mistakes, it looks like. On the curb, we see the car just getting a little bit twitchy as he touches the curb. But it's so difficult to stay off them, especially in this sector, as you want to try and straighten out the corners as much as possible. And if you want to do that, then you need to go over the curbing. Sean Caesar also looking pretty sharp through sector 1 on the track and into 2. But the big heavy braking zones, that's where you gain a lot of time if you can get that right in these conditions. Into 11 we go. Both cars narrowly avoids the big curbing on the inside. There's sort of like an iceberg-ish curb there on the inside of the corner of 11 that you definitely don't want to touch, as that will throw your car off a little bit. And as we have saw in qualifying, I think it was Sean Caesar or Sander Vale that touched and then just couldn't get the car turned as the front wheels sort of lift from the ground when you hit it, and then when they touched back down again, you will understeer massively and run wide. Through sector 3 we go. This time Vargas with the braking mistake. Van der Linden have actually caught up to a Schickerman in the front of the field as well. As we can see, Van Liebenstein also just lurking in the background. Just catching up ever so slightly lap by lap. Taking the fastest lap back there does Van Liebenstein. Not that much quicker than Van der Linden though, as he is right over the rear bumper now of Schickerman. These two have been almost glued together for the for most parts of this race. There could be some championship implications from these two drivers, at least between them. I know Schickerman would actually need quite a few points to catch up to Van der Linden, as he is 18 points behind. But Sean Caesar and Schickerman next to each other in the championship standings, just 4 points between the two of them. Just to keep in mind for if you're having your scorecards out there behind your screens or devices in your living room, bedroom, or wherever you might be. Chris Hill saying something in the background that I totally didn't hear. Vargas have gone past Caesar in the off-camera as Checkerman goes wide. So Vargas will be on the chase now for Rick DeMoy and Samuel von Liebenstein. But a very, very big gap between all of them. But look at that. Van der Linden now really applying the pressure to Checkerman. And I think that Checkerman can feel the pressure. Direct battle for the lead of the race. As we are getting closer and closer to another rain spell in this event. I am starting to doubt severely whether or not that we'll see the slick tires come out nearing the end, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Fresh wet tires does give a huge advantage over the worn ones. Van Linden with the new fastest lap of the race. So if you do believe that it's going to stay wet for the remainder of the race, then it might be worth coming in at the halfway point to take fresh wet tires. But a bit risky. If it gets dry enough for full dry tires later on in the race, then you are already down one pit stop. And the pit lane are quite long around COTA, if I remember correctly. Looks like Van Linden have a lot more speed than Checkerman at the moment, but nowhere to go with it really through sector 1. As he could potentially try for it into to 11, but I think he will wait until the end of the back straight. Tucks in behind, and now it's all about getting the best possible exit. Takes quite a bit more tight line there, does Patrick Van der Linden, and does lose out a bit by doing so to Checkerman, as Checkerman goes flying down the back straight. Unchallenged, as we see von Liebenstein trying to cool the tires. It could indicate that von Liebenstein will not be chancing it and coming in for a fresh set of wets here at the halfway point. I think if I was Nick Vargas, then I might go for the risk. He does need to beat out von Liebenstein to take this championship. But if he can't do so, then it's not worth it. If he finishes a 10th behind or half a lap, even 2 laps behind, it doesn't really matter. It's all about getting that final position over von Liebenstein. We could potentially do a little bit of maps and see who's in third. There'll be Sam Smeets, who's not here. Patrick Van der Linden would be the closest other driver. But he's, what would that be, 21 points behind von Liebenstein, so that would be quite a stretch, as von Liebenstein would have to basically not score in this event, which is quite difficult when there's only 7 cars and only 6 of them in the point-scoring position. Sean Caesar coming into the pits. That could be for fresh wets or damage repairs, but I do think that he will come in for fresh wets. Let's see if the mandatory stop marker disappears when he comes out. If it does so, then it's definitely for the fresh set of wet weather tires. Maybe trying to get the PSI under control. That could also be the thing that Van der Linden's tires are now coming into their prime, where Checkerman might have pressured his tires for a little bit more wet conditions, as Checkerman there gets a little bit of wheel spin that puts him under immediate pressure as they're heading down the back straight. Van der Linden tucking into the slipstream, Checkerman choosing to go defensive. Van der Linden on the outside, Sean Caesar did take tires. Patrick Van der Linden on the outside of Checkerman, Checkerman braking later, but I think he will run a little bit too deep, just a bit. And this means that Van der Linden on the outside now of Checkerman. This could be the opportunity for von Liebenstein as well, still side by side. As now von Liebenstein, he's right in it with them. Where does Van der Linden go? Nowhere to go really in this situation. But look at that von Lebenstein with a much better exit. Can he get something out of it? Doesn't look like it, not quite. As they head through the Istanbul corner, half of the race have passed at this point. Sean Caesar out on fresh tires, presumably fresh wets, and the rain have started. The rain is back. Not super intense at the minute, but it will intensify a bit in not so long. So I'm in the... I don't think that it will be dry enough for dries in this event. I think that wet weather tires will be the tires to be on for the rest of the race. So I'm going to be a little bit interested in seeing if anyone comes in here at the halfway point to take the fresh set of Pirelli rubbers. Or Pirelli wet weather rubbers. Virtual Pirelli wet weather rubbers. As these three are running so close together. But again, it's challenging to overtake, especially in these conditions, if you're not assisted by a mistake when you're so equal on lap time. I would say it's easier overtaking these slower drivers in conditions like this, but when it's so close between them, it is very challenging to get by. You basically need to have passed before you go into the braking zone. Into the 10 or 11 or whatever the number of the corner is, 27. We go through. This time no wheel spin for Scheckermann, and the gaps looks stable between the three of them. But this is all of the podium drivers at the minute within the same picture, coming down the back straight into the braking zone. Looks like that they all hit it nicely. There are different lines though from Scheckermann and van der Linden. Looks like that van der Linden took a little bit of more trail braking approach, or did a little bit of trail braking nearing the end of the brakes there, and Scheckermann just going down to the speed that he wanted and then turns the car in. That could be the difference of engine placement in the cars, as the 911 have a slightly more rearwards placement of the engine than the than the R8 and the NSX behind. That should make the 911 more stable in conditions like this, but haven't really been super showing so far. At least not more stable than the R8. It has looked very stable though compared to the rest of the field. Von Lebenstein comes into the pits, presumably to take fresh wet tires and to undercut the two leaders. I think I would have done the same if I was him, and I think I would do the same if I was any of the drivers, to be honest. Vargas pits as well, so no difference in strategy between the two championship leaders. As at this point, I also think the drivers can see weather prediction for the rest of the race, and I don't think it will be anything but wet tires. Rain have intensified once again, but still just a wet track though. It will need to intensify quite a bit more for it to become flooded again. I doubt that it will happen, but it is definitely getting more and more wet at this part of the race, or at this point of the weather. Unpredictable virtual Texas weather. Vale came in also. Von Lebenstein will obviously be heading out ahead of the three pit stoppers this lap in. Vargas will come out second of those, and then Vale behind. I think they will all emerge or merge onto the track ahead of Sean Caesar, who's quite the distance behind. I wonder if you have made some mistakes that we haven't caught on to. Maybe if I was van der Linden, I would do the opposite of what Scheckermann does this time out. But the pits will definitely be on the cards for these drivers. Top three yet to pit, being Scheckermann, van der Linden, and Rick De Moy. De Moy actually holding the fastest lap of the race as we are speaking. 6 seconds behind the two race leaders. He could potentially catch up a little bit to them. Well, he could potentially catch up to them if he continues lapping in that pace. Let's see, Scheckermann dives into the pits. Patrick van der Linden trying to overcut. Yellow flags out for Sean Caesar. So he have been around as the track is getting more and more wet. So if Van der Linden left out there on track, usually I wouldn't say that it's the best thing to do to stay out in these conditions when you do have the mandatory pit stop, and the half and half strategy would probably be the best. But trying something different to Schickermann, that could be the thing that gets him the position. Having a better pit stop, getting slowed down better than Schickermann, and getting that the stopping points spot on, that could be the big difference. The pit stops should be about equal. They should be equal if they're just taking tires and fuel. Then it'll be a 30-second stop. But of course, it could have potential damage on the car that they might wish to repair. So the difference in pit stop time are basically the acceleration out of the box, the slowing down into the box, and the slowing down into the pit lane. That's where all the time difference comes from. But Van der Linden really needs to push this. But then again, he's out there on the track. It is getting more and more wet, so he'll have a slightly less wet track to drive on this lap than Schickermann will on the same lap number. And that could potentially be the saving grace for Van der Linden. He might also be thinking that it could potentially, with a very slight chance, get dry near the end of the race, and that he doesn't want to take that additional pit stop. I highly doubt it though, but he could be rolling the dice on that. Schickermann comes out ahead of von Liebenstein. Not by much though. Roughly the same gap as before the stops, but let's see what will happen after Van der Linden's stop. If he takes it this time around, of course. But at this point, Schickermann is just trying to get the pressures back up in the tires and getting some heat into them. So Van Liebenstein with the upper hand in these in this lap at least, and maybe the next one as well, before Schickermann's tires will be fully operational. Van der Linden and Rick de Moy staying out. Yellow flags again for Sean Caesar, who's not having a good time after pit stops as he retires from the race. Down to 6 runners out there on track. But my god, even though that we only have 6 runners on track, the action is still pretty intense, especially between Schickermann, Van der Linden, and Van Liebenstein. I think Van der Linden might have made a little bit of a mistake, as he's marked as being on an invalid lap, but still no pit stops from the 2 leaders. I wonder if they are risking it and going until they could potentially get the dries on. Still highly doubt that it will be ready for the dries, and their pace should be a lot slower than the 2 guys behind giving chase. Schickermann with a small mistake, allowing Van Liebenstein to close a few extra meters there. But coming into the Maggots-Beckett section, it's very difficult to get the overtake done. Also tricky to stay close behind, because you have to be so aware of when the car ahead of you brakes and slows down, and what he is doing. You can't just run your own lines. Also, the dirty are not as much of an issue in these conditions. It's more the tricky track surface that causes issues. But look how close they are through these corners. Van Liebenstein definitely close enough that he could try it at the end of the back straight, or he could potentially have tried into this braking zone and try to psych out Schickermann. Does get a slightly tighter rotation. Tucks nicely into the slipstream. Rick de Moy comes into the pits. He might have realized that the track will never be dry enough for dry tires. Van Liebenstein on the outside. He could also be low on fuel. Van Liebenstein on the outside, but not quite there to challenge to go side by side into the next couple of corners. The more these 2 battle, the better for Patrick Van der Linden up in front. But what a recovery drive from Van Liebenstein in this race so far. After all of that, or the incident on lap 1, that he have fought his way back through the field, caught up to I actually don't know if he's the virtual race leader. It will depend on whether or not that Van Linden can go to dries when he comes to take his pit stop. But I would think that Schickermann at the minute would be the virtual race leader when the pit stops have been served. And Van Liebenstein will be P2, but again, we'll have to wait and see, because not that much in it. It will be tight though for the front positions. I do think that they will be ahead, but Van Linden will be right behind them. Ooh, Schickermann there with the mistake, allowing Van Liebenstein through. So now Van Liebenstein have clear air ahead of him. No traffic, no nothing. He can focus fully on his own race. But whether or not that's a good thing, now he has to find his own rhythm again, so he needs to figure out how much he can push the car now. He can no longer just drive to the pace of Schickermann did. Now he have to really, really push, otherwise Schickermann will be right back on top of Van Liebenstein. 18 minutes to go and a bunch of seconds here in the final round. I do wish that we had a full grid for this event, as that would have been a crazy race. But Van Liebenstein around turn 10 or 11, I think it actually is 11, and maybe we should get that up on Google at some point. This time Patrick Van Linden comes into the pits. Either he have run out of fuel or he have realized that it's never going to be dry enough for dry tires. It would be very risky though to put on the dries now. It would be an option, but I don't think it would be that smart. But again, it's a very long gap actually from Van Linden down to these drivers, or down to Van Liebenstein, but will it be enough? Have we had that much of a pace advantage on low fuel? I think he'll be dropping from the jacks shortly, and he might actually come out in front. He might actually do it. They're heading into 19 now, at least Van Liebenstein is. You need to start moving now, Van der Linden. He drops and he is going. This is going to be tied into turn 1. I do actually think that, thinking about that Van der Linden might actually have done it. It will be very tight. Now Van Liebenstein is on the start-finish straight at full throttle. Van der Linden out of the pit lane limiter there. They'll be very, very close into turn 1. No, Van Liebenstein does make it on the outside. They are side by side into turn 1. Van Liebenstein and Van der Linden for the race lead. Wow, Van Liebenstein trying on the outside. Van Liebenstein does have both pressure and heat in the tires. Van der Linden will need to try and defend now on cold tires to keep the Honda behind. This is so tight between them. Oh, that was close. What a strategy also there from Van der Linden. He made the overcut work, but he if it's truly working, then he needs to keep Van Liebenstein behind while the tires are pressuring up and heating up. I'll give it a lap or two, and then Van Liebenstein should be on. Oh, sorry, then Patrick Van der Linden should be on equal racing terms with Van Liebenstein. But until that point, he is vulnerable. Coming out of the hairpin leading onto the back straight through turn 11, they went. Van Liebenstein tucks into the slipstream. Just over a quarter of the race to go. Van Liebenstein have recently taken the fastest lap of the race. The rain have also gone down in intensity a little bit, but it's still coming down. Almost bumper to bumper racing here, as Rick de Moy is actually also quite close to the back end of this battle with Schickermann also. Different lines. Van der Linden on the more defensive line. Van Liebenstein not able to get anything out of that slight extra speed that he got now through the Istanbul corners. Very similar lines, close together, similar speed. Into 19 we go. Oh, so close to the sausage. They've hit that sausage in these conditions. I don't dare dream of what the cars might be doing. through 20, slightly tighter from Van Liebenstein. Loses a little bit of speed there on the exit of 20, but tucked into the slipstream. Will it be enough into turn 1 here on the start of lap 19? And Van Linden doing the smart thing and trail breaking into the corner, taking that more, not the outside line, but going a little bit across the track, under braking there. And they're already now showing that is his line, so he'll continue to do that for the next couple of laps. I will assume that will just naturally defend the corner from Van Liebenstein, but Van Liebenstein might have the thought in his head that he can potentially just keep it wide and get the better corner, better exit speed, and braking a little bit later than Van der Linden. Try the move through turn 2, not into turn 2, but through it, because that is how that would happen, or could happen potentially. But if Van Liebenstein does need to keep up now with Van der Linden, as Schickermann is right in the back of this once again. So it is a three-way, four-way battle, as De Moy have also caught up to the back of this. So the drama continues in the top 4. Van Liebenstein can't really afford to be too aggressive, because he does need to keep in mind that he cannot drop down behind Nick Vargas, but he is about 20-21 seconds behind these guys. De Moy have taken the fastest lap away from Van Liebenstein, but I think for the rest of the race we'll see new fastest laps almost every lap from this point on. Van Liebenstein in full attack on Van der Linden. Same goes behind for Rick De Moy on Schickermann. As it's gone from a four-way battle to 2 duos, from the quartet to the duos. Let's hope they don't become singles. Look how close they are there through turn 20. Schickermann with a slight mistake, it looks like, and that leaves the door wide open for Rick De Moy. De Moy have passed Schickermann, but for the lead of the race, Van der Linden goes a little bit defensive. Follows Van Liebenstein to the door. And there the mistake came there from Van der Linden. Now Van Liebenstein in the race lead. He have taken the lead of the race for the first time in a long time in this event. Track gone back down to damp. Schickermann running a little bit wide there. But now it's all about tire preservation. We all know that these wet tires, they don't like to be driven too much in these conditions. They have to have, I think the drivers, they have thought about the tire pressures when they went into the pits and kept them as low as they dare to. Schickermann with the drive-through for track cuts. Went wide, and the game feels like that he gained an advantage for the 4th time in the race. Therefore, it's a drive-through for Schickermann. Very, very unfortunate for the Porsche driver, but that could happen to anyone really in this race. Rick De Moy this time on the attack on Patrick Van der Linden. Will they go back to as they started with the Hondas 1 and 2? Look at that, De Moy following Van der Linden, taking all of the slipstream possible. Now moving out to the attack. Trying it on the outside. Van der Linden comes following him into the corner. Side by side really there. Ooh, as he gets a little bit wide then onto the curves. And that's what we were saying about those curves. If you touch those in these conditions, you will surely go around. But that's how it goes sometimes in racing. Rick De Moy dropping down into 4th, but he will get 3rd back when Schickermann takes that drive-through penalty. So Patrick Van der Linden all alone in 2nd, Samuel Van Liebenstein all alone in 1st, and Rick De Moy will be all alone in 3rd as soon as Schickermann takes that penalty. But where Schickermann will come out will be determining whether or not that he will be in any kind of battles. As we see Schickermann taking the penalty this time around. 10 minutes 30 seconds to go of this season. Van Linden running wide there through 20. De Moy making the overtake as we are speaking. But will Vargas also catch up? Schickermann stops in the pits for some reason. I wonder he's taking dry tires and then serving the drive-through next lap maybe. But I think Schickermann might be gambling everything to go onto the dry tires with 10 minutes to go. If it is the right call, then he could potentially actually crawl. I don't think he'll crawl back into it with that drive-through, to be honest. But it could be worth the risk for some of the drivers. A driver like Nick Vargas could start thinking about it as well. Don't think anyone in the top 3 would be willing to try it. But Vargas, he have nothing to lose in this one. Or maybe Schickermann have retired as he's still stationary in the pits. Also, I don't think the track would have been ready for the dries as of yet. But if he would have to go and do a slow lap then drive through, then it would probably get close-ish. Nah, it's still too wet. And I think that Schickermann actually have just put it into the garage to retire in the pits if he's still not moved from pit lane. Still parked. Either that or he had some severe damage that he's repairing. Or maybe just had to take a shit. I mean, he had to lay a feces. Or something like that. The politically correct way of saying that is the word that I was looking for. Yes, then you can imagine your own word. Or maybe don't. We know how you guys are. It will go very wrong. Anyway, Sander Vale in 5th. Nothing really to race for either, except for the fun of it. In the green 808 Ferrari. Through sector 3 he will go once again. 8 minutes to go in this race. 4 to 5 laps-ish depending on lap times. Vale coming through 2 more corners in the race leads Samuel von Liebenstein in the Honda. Little bit of a slide there going over the curves, but these damn conditions, they are so fun to race in. You can start feeling the car getting more and more grip as you're going. Also fastest lap in the race to von Liebenstein, but you can really feel how the grip is coming to you at this point in the race. And the more grip you feel, the more confident you get, but that can be risky as well. And then the managing of the electronics in the cars. In these conditions, you would probably start turning down the TC from your full wet settings and getting them closer and closer to a dry condition racing. I don't think you'll get quite down there, but you will definitely start doing that, and you might even start moving your brake bias a little bit more forwards again after having slightly more rearwards in the early parts of this race with the much more wet track surfaces. But we could maybe ask some drivers after the race about that if they are coming in for interviews. Samuel running through the Istanbul corner. (19 and 20) again. He's running. I think he is running with a minimum risk in his driving at the minute. Doesn't look like that he's pushing it that hard. He does know that he have a 4.8 second gap down to Van der Linden behind him, and there's no purpose really in super pushing. The gap actually increases there to 5.8, so he is pulling away, but it does look like he's safe driving the car. And why wouldn't you be in a situation like this? Track have gone too greasy at this point, so this would definitely be the crossover territory for the dry tires. Don't think it would be worth it with just 5.5 minutes to go. But if you just want the glory lap and trying to get the fastest lap of the race, then it could be a potential move to go into the pits and take the dry tires. Invalid lap there for Patrick van der Linden, so he might have been a little bit off track. I wonder why Schickerman actually retired from the race, because you never know if someone else will get a drive-through later on in this one as well. Though I do think with the field spread at the minute, most of the drivers have just started to consolidate their positions and saving at home. We do see that in the background there that Van Linden is cooling his tires on the back straight. Van Liebenstein is not doing that yet. Following Patrick van der Linden here through the tricky sector 3. Very, very good place for racing, and good views from the grandstands over in the Maggots-Beckett section of the track as well, as they would be able to see all the way down into this part of the track. Imagine standing up on top of that tower. It must look like toy cars running around the track when you are so far above the ground, and you can see all of them moving around. I think that would be quite the experience. But obviously you would have to walk all the way up there, and not that many Americans could actually do that without having a stroke. Oh well, maybe Americans could do that, but maybe not the Texans. Across the line he goes. That 2 more laps it will be for the drivers. As we see the sun actually kicking in a little bit now, slightly lighter track. See the dry line really starting to form. Van der Linden running through the first sector. The Maggots-Beckett sector of the track. They have taken a lot of inspiration from other tracks around the world when they built COTA. One of the better modern racing tracks that have been built of the full-purpose racing tracks. Still not on my absolute top-tier list of racing tracks in the world, but a very, very good track at least. Fun enough to drive, but tricky enough to drive. I don't like the long back straight. I feel like that's a bit too long when you're driving it. It gets a bit boring driving down it, but besides that, it's a very tricky track to drive, which I find fun myself, and a lot of good corners for racing. You have the tricky sector 1 and then the sector 3, where you can go side by side through all of the corners basically. Very, very good track design. Rick de Moy here in third. Have had a little bit of an up and down race, but basically all of the drivers have had that, to be honest. Rick de Moy in third, coming around into the sector 3 here. I actually think if Vargas could have avoided that big crash early on in the race, he would have been at least in contention for the podium positions. Not entirely sure he would have been up there with Van Liebenstein, but it would have been tight, because he did lose a lot of time on that. He was stationary for quite a while, and he had, I think, a follow-up spin later on as well. Rick de Moy coming across the line. Do believe that Van Liebenstein will have gotten the white flag at this point and will have gone on to the final lap of the race. Brief yellow there, that's for championship leader Nick Vargas, but soon to not be anymore. Oh, sorry, it's Van Liebenstein who's championship leader, not Vargas. By that 1 point difference. But yeah, super race, and it's actually getting quite close here between Rick de Moy and Patrick van der Linden here, as the race is coming to its closing stages. Could de Moy potentially go for something on van der Linden here in the final lap? It does look like that he have the pace. Very, very close down the back straight. Remember, the final overtaking opportunity around here would be turn 20, the final corner, so this could go right down to the wire between the two of them. Battle for P2. De Moy goes to the outside, Van Linden covers off the inside line, but that will be a very, very tight corner. Same situation as we had earlier, basically, as De Moy have to run wide, falls in behind. Still a few opportunities to go, but he will have to stay so close and hope for a little bit of a mistake, as the track have gone green at this point. So similar to qualifying conditions. Coming through Istanbul for the final time. Looking at Van Liebenstein in the bottom right hand picture, who needs 2 more corners to secure the championship. But a very close look at this. De Moy into 19, super close. Will he try the dive into 20? Looks like it. Van Linden have to defend this one. Side by side. De Moy is ahead coming into 20. Congratulations, Van Liebenstein. Drag race to the line. De Moy takes second through turn 20. Super late, super good overtake there for Rick De Moy. Van Liebenstein wins, De Moy second, Van Linden third, Vargas will come in to take fourth, and then Sander Vale in fifth. Championship goes to Samuel Van Liebenstein unless he gets stamped with a massive ton of penalties, which is highly unlikely after this race. Vargas coming in, good performance at the end, strong season, but not quite enough. Vale takes the AM championship as well. Super racing. And Vale coming around just a few more corners and he'll be the last of the drivers to come across the line this season. Vale looked very strong in the flooded conditions. Then it came down a little bit as the track dried up. But a Vale across the line, and that is the end of the season, everyone. Thank you all for watching, and everyone who have tuned in. This has been an amazing season. I feel like this Sunday championship really has been tight, with the championships coming right down to the final race and multiple race winners. Super good racing throughout the season. Very unpredictable in general, and yeah, it's... What a great season. Remember to tune in on Tuesday for the final of the Tuesday Championship. The main sprint championship, many people calls it, as that's the championship that's been going on for the longest of times. And then again, Wednesday next week will be, well, not the week that we're going into, of course, but the week after. Wednesday, the 21st it will be, no, that's this week. Wednesday the 28th it will be that the LMU Championship goes to Sebring, the SLMS. Let's see if any one of the drivers participating in this race comes into the interview room, and we'll talk a little bit about how the race went with the treacherous conditions early on, or maybe just talk about the championship in general. As we see some of the sliding in the background. Not that we are waiting in here for too long, because it is a Sunday evening and some of us have work tomorrow. I think most of us actually have work tomorrow, but it is what it is. Doesn't look like that anyone wants to come and talk to us, which leaves yeah, with only a few words left to say. I have been Oliver Anderson, Mr. One of Oliver. Behind the cameras have been Grandpa Chris Hill all season. What a true joy and pleasure to have brought this championship to you guys out there. We will definitely see you for the next season, and Tuesday as well for the final of the sprints. Have a good evening, and until next time, take care. Da, 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 da.